Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. Find us online at hancepodcast.com. Chancellor, how about you get us started with your saying of the day?
George Washington said it's better to be alone than with bad company. My mother always liked that one. She thought, Washington, you can say what you want to about the cherry tree being chopped down, all that, but his statement's better to be alone than with bad company.
That's a good one.
And it is a good one, especially when you're dealing with teenagers. That she always said that to me and my sisters.
Chancellor, over the weekend I emceed a benefit for our veterans, and a guy came up to me and said hi, and then his first question was, "Is Chancellor Hance here?" And I said, "Well, no, he's not here, but he listens to the podcast."
Well, good.
He's a school teacher, and he told me that his favorite story of yours is the one about the kid in school that jumped out the window. And I said, you know what, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to see him this week. I'm going to ask him to share that story again.
Well, that was, the kid's name was Monk Smith, and he didn't always use good judgment. And Bud English bet him $1, which was a lot of money then, that he wouldn't jump out the window. And he went over and jumped out. When he came back to get his $1, Bud said, "I'm in head first," so he went running down the aisle and dove out. There was some bush. We were on the second floor.
And this is in a classroom.
And Ms. Merritt was teaching. She was a great teacher. And he came back in, kind of scratched up and everything. She didn't break stride. She just said, "Monk, I can't teach you if you're going to keep jumping out the window." And teachers have difficult problems from time to time, and I always feel sorry for them that when they have to deal with kids like that. But she just wanted to let him know that, I can teach you, but if you're going to be jumped out the window, it's going to be real hard to teach you.
It probably cut through with Monk more than a big lecture or a screaming match. It probably stuck with him.
I don't know whatever happened to him.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If it does.
Yeah.
A lot to talk about this week in the news. President Trump, or elect Trump, is not messing around when it comes to his staff, his cabinet.
He's putting it together fast,
yeah.
And I like that. And I think one of the things before that, when he first got elected president the first time, things were happening so fast, and he didn't have an idea, and they weren't really prepared. But he's had a guy working on the transition for the last 4 months. So, and both sides always do that, just in case they'll be well prepared. He selected his chief of staff immediately, in Susie Wiles. She ran his campaign. She has been involved in a lot of campaigns. Her dad was Pat Summerall, the broadcast guy that did football. Was very good. And she went to the University of Maryland, and Trump listens to her, more than most staff members, and he makes his decisions, and he makes them sometimes spur of the moment, whatever. But if he decides they're going a certain direction, that's the direction they're going.
Is she someone that can make him think twice?
Yeah, and I think that he respects her and her opinion, and that she tried to keep him on message and was pretty good at it during the last 30, 40 days. There'd be a time or two that we'd get off on Arnold Palmer or something like that. He said, whoa. And I think that there was a guy one time told me, a guy out of Houston named Templeton, and he said that there are certain candidates that are like a big old collie dog. They may make some mistakes, knock some things over, but the public likes them. So if you're trying to shut them down, don't do it to the extent the public goes, "Well, he's changed, I don't like him." And so there's a big following out there, and I mean it's hardcore for Trump, and they think he's great, and you don't want to change him to the point that they start having doubts or anything. And also, he would be very unhappy if you completely changed him. He would not do well.
I think what the American people liked about Trump is is he's authentic. He is who he is.
And he says things that
We're thinking.
you went, well, wow, I wouldn't have said that or something. But that's his modus operandi, and he's not going to change. And that there's some people, really like it, really like him. But there are certain ones that Democrats that don't like a Republican anyway,
right?
But they really don't like Trump. And so they're going to be after him just like they were the last year. All these indictments and lawsuits and assassination. And I think you got to be careful in Secret Service that they have to step up their game plan because it's just a dangerous situation.
Will the head of the Secret Service change with the new?
Yes,
it will.
Yes.
Okay.
And what happens? The new Secretary of Treasury. Treasury has not been named. Neither has Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Agriculture. Mm-hmm. He's named out of 15 cabinet positions. He's named 8 of them, and so he's about halfway there on those. And then he's gone with others that are a little controversial. Matt Gaetz, that'll get a lot of ink and a lot of spin, and he's a guy who reminds me, Bobby Knight. I one time took a poll in the Lubbock area, and I threw in a late question about what do you think about Bobby Knight. There was no one undecided. I'd never seen a poll where you ask about an individual, there's not some that are undecided. They either loved him or they didn't love him, and I think Matt Gaetz is that way. What the president was doing with him was sending a shot across the bow that I'm going to get somebody that's going to be tough. Now, I don't know that, he get approved or not, but there'll be a lot of questions, a lot of, that'll take some time. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now you had people like Marco Rubio, who's liked by most of the people in the Senate, and I think he'll go sailing through pretty fast because they usually don't turn him in. You've got to have somebody in that Senate that's really mad at you if you've served there, and they usually approve you pretty fast. Sam Nunn was always very jealous of the publicity that John Tower got, and he was after him and raised such a stink that he was able to keep Tower from being Secretary of Defense. Well, Tower knew more about defense than anyone. He'd been there a long time, and he'd been on the defense committee and been chairman. And that's one of the few where a senator got hit by some of the senator on the other side. UN ambassador. I thought this was a good appointment. Elise Stefanik. She has a BA from Harvard. She's very smart. She'd worked for Bush. She's been around the White House forever. She's 40, so she's pretty young. But now, if they think they'll, scare her, she's not afraid of the devil. I mean, she will give them a bad time. She's been a great supporter of Israel. Speaking of Israel, Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas, will be the ambassador to Israel, and Israelis were thrilled about that. Countries, you have 2 types of ambassadors. You have ambassadors that are close to the president, help the president get elected, and then you have the career people that come out of the State Department. In most countries, they want somebody that's close to the president. They don't want necessarily a career person. But on the other hand, you can't, to certain areas, Nicaragua or a place like that, you send State Department people because you don't want to put, somebody else at risk, I guess. But a country loves it when LBJ appointed Ed Clark, who had been his lawyer, as ambassador to Australia. They loved it. They wanted to feel like they had somebody that could pick up a phone and get the president and tell him what some problem was.
Going back a little bit to Elise Stefanik, for people that may not remember, she's the woman that really held the presidents of the universities to task.
She had the president of Columbia and Harvard and Yale, I think it was.
She went after him.
But she went after him. She didn't back away one iota. And, she wanted to know, freedom of expression and what they were doing, and what they were allowing hate groups to come on campus and try to intimidate, Jewish students. And she didn't let up, and 2 of the 3 were gone pretty fast. They didn't last long after she got through with them.
Right.
And she was asking tough questions. She was well prepared, and she will be well prepared at the UN, and will be well represented. She'll do a great job. The border czar, Tom Homan, if you've ever watched him on TV, he's no cop. He was policeman, and he believes in enforcing the law, and he believes in stopping people coming in that are illegal and stop them from breaking the law. And they will immediately start trying to find people in jails or in prisons that are here illegally and shipping them back. And I think that's going to be the whole first year. They're going to do everything they can to make sure that they get people that are committing crimes or that have a history of crime or that were turned out of a prison in Venezuela or wherever. Those people, their days are numbered. They're going to send them back home and should. But now he is a hard guy. He worked for Obama, and he worked for Trump in the first Trump administration. And he believes if a law is there, you need to enforce it. And if you don't like what's going on, then go change the law. And he's very straightforward on anything he says or does.
He definitely know where he stands on issues.
Yeah, you don't leave. You don't turn off TV after he's been on. So I wonder what he thought. You're going to know. Secretary of Defense, the Pete Hegseth. Pete was. He's been a commentator on Fox News, and if you ever watch Fox, you know who it was. He got his bachelor's at Princeton and his master's in public policy at Harvard. He's well educated, he's a smart guy, and he believes that political wokeness should not be in the military, and that hurts the military. It hurts their recruiting, and he will make some major changes. Now, there's going to be people that are going to fight him, and some of them are going to be, people that, because he may not approve their weapons. He may think that it's outdated and you don't need X or whatever it might be.
He's a guy that really believes in having a conclusion to any foreign war that we may have.
Yeah,
have an objective.
He doesn't have an exit policy. One time, we got in the war in Iraq, and one of the former officials said, well, they're in trouble because they don't have an exit policy. And George Patton always had an exit policy. We win and you lose, and now you're going to do what we tell you, period. And that's the reason we still have troops in Japan and in South Korea and in Germany, and it's worked well, and they don't get shot. They don't have it, and would have worked well if they had left, which Trump wanted them to leave 2,500 people to 5,000, something like that, just to provide stability. And when we pulled out the way we did in Afghanistan, it was the worst mistake that we've made in foreign policy in the last 100 years. It was just a terrible decision. Terrible.
It showed ineptness. It showed that we didn't know what we were doing.
We didn't know what we were doing. Yeah. And the generals are all saying, don't do it. Whether they were liberal or conservative, whatever, they're saying, don't do that. And National Security Advisor, Congressman Michael Waltz from Florida, non-controversial. He probably goes sailing through. And the White House General Counsel, that's a White House lawyer. That's a hard job. That's a tough job. And Bill McGinley, he was former cabinet secretary. They have a cabinet secretary at the White House that is in charge of all the cabinet meetings and dealing with all the cabinet members. And he has done that. So he knows his way around Washington. He would know who is a player and who wasn't a player. And then Homeland Security, Governor Christie Nome from South Dakota, and you figured she was going to get something. She campaigned for him pretty hard. She campaigned for herself, and then her campaign, she had a book that came out, didn't help her, and so I think it became obvious that she wasn't going to get to be vice president.
Right.
But that she would be in Homeland Security. She'll be dealing with Homan on that, and they'll make a good team, and she'll be out there making some statements. He doesn't care about making any statements. He's going to be trying to keep people out that are not supposed to be here and keep out people that have been let out of insane asylums and prisons and things like that have come here. CIA, John Ratcliffe. John's a Notre Dame graduate, went to SMU Law School. He was a member of Congress. He beat Ralph Hall and probably beat him on age factor. Ralph had been there. He was 93. He served. He was the oldest person to ever serve in Congress, in the House. And but John's a good man, and he and Ralph were good friends and got to be real good friends after he took Ralph Hall's place. But he'll be great. He was a national security person when Trump was in there last time. So
he knows his way around.
He knows his way around, and he may get a little pushback, but I don't think it'll be a lot. Now, the Democrats may take the approach that they're going to push back on everybody, and I would think that would not be a smart approach. They need to pick and choose what they're going to do. Director of National Intelligence, that would be Tulsi Gabbard. She was a member of Congress, a Democrat member from Hawaii, and has been in the Guard and been in the military, and is pretty well respected in that area. And I think that she will do a good job. And Democrats may go after her a little since she switched parties. They don't necessarily like that. And EPA, Lee Zeldin from New York, be EPA. And I think that's a tough job because no matter what you do, some of the businesses are going to be upset with you and the public's going to be upset. And I've always said that the Paris Accord, Trump's going to drop that like a hot potato.
Can you remind everyone what
the Paris Accord was? Where all the environmental leaders from countries got together in Paris, and they came up with all of these rules and regulations that were phased in on India and didn't really apply to China for a long time, but they applied to the United States. So we're going to have to cut back on our production of anything we're doing in oil and gas and fossil fuels. And Trump got us out of it, and Biden got us back into it. And I think Trump will get us. My thing, I think that he ought to have instead of Paris Accord, have a Washington Accord, and just tell all the countries, y'all just do what we're doing, and we don't add anything, and y'all got to comply with our EPA rules and see how they like that. China continues to build a coal plant once a week, and we were going to have standards on the United States that would be harsh and exempt China from parts of it and India. And you just don't do that. That goes back to Jimmy Carter when he had the windfall profits tax that taxed oil produced in the United States, but exempted if it came from Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or any of the OPEC countries. So we paid a tax on what we were doing, our production, and then, if somebody is bringing in oil from another country, well, they were exempt. They didn't have to. It was a reverse tariff. So we're going to put a tariff on our goods. We'll show you. We'll tax us, but we're not going to tax y'all. Well, I mean, that caused a lot of problems, and the producers really resented it. Why would you tax us and put a tariff on us and let our competitors from other countries go? And didn't make sense. Right. They finally got that repealed. Department of Government Efficiency.
This is one everyone's talking about, Chancellor.
I tell you,
big deal.
It will be. Most people are not old enough to remember the Grace Commission, And the Grace Commission back in the early 80s came up with ideas on how to save money and be more efficient. And most of them got hung up in Congress, never got out. With Elon Musk, he can spend some money getting those ideas out if he decides to. And Vivek and Elon Musk have been successful business people, and I think that they'll come back with eliminating a lot of programs. Now, here's the thing to remember, though. If they abolish government and leave defense, entitlements of Social Security and Medicare, and interest on the debt, if they leave those four things alone, they're still not going to make a dent. You know, it's the entitlements have to be addressed at some point in time. I don't know if they will. The national debt was one issue that Trump never brought it up, and Harris never. She didn't even hint about it. And the problem is that if you bring it up and make it too big a deal, it's hard to pass tax cuts for the Republicans. And if the Democrats bring it up and make it a big deal, it's hard to pass spending controls on the Democrats. And so it is tough. But we have got to address the national debt. You know, you're adding 10,000 people a day to Social Security. Mm-hmm. People living longer. Mm-hmm. You know, Yugoslavia, before they disintegrated, that they had a program they were going to implement to stop smoking. And the guy that ran Social Security went running over to the president's office and said, "Don't do that. People be living longer. We can't afford it." You know, and which is kind of funny, but you know, I mean, that's what he's saying. We can't afford that. If they start living longer, you're going to break the system. Mm-hmm. So they didn't go through with that system. You know, as I travel around the world from time to time, you can tell a country where there's not been any attempt to cut down on smoking. And it's just there's a lot of difference.
So you're saying that the entitlements that are out there, they can cut everything else all over the place, the different things, but until they get into those four, you said?
Four. One of them's national defense. One of them's interest. You got no control over that one.
Right.
Interest on the debt, the money you borrow, and then Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Unless they address those, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, in 1982, we addressed Social Security, moved the age up a little. Mm-hmm. And, what was the average age of death in the 30s compared to what it is today? Right. People living longer. Mm-hmm. And, I think they need to just say that they're not making cuts. They're trying to slow down the growth. And I think it's going to take someone to spend some time and effort trying to explain this to the public. But Democrats, they accuse the Republicans of wanting to cut Social Security when they didn't even talk about it. They were whistling past the graveyard. They didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
And Democrats wanted to say, well, they have talked about it. Mm-hmm. And so it's been very difficult. Now, Trump's looking at putting some tariffs on, and maybe he can balance the budget that way. That's kind of a hidden issue, but we'll see what happens on that. That'll be the free trade people won't like that, but he did it last time, and it worked pretty well. Mm-hmm. Here's another one that's big. Head of Personnel Office, and that's Sergio Gore, who was with Rand Paul. And there's like 4,000 appointments the president's going to make. And so the head of the personnel office will interview people and make recommendations, and it'll go to the White House, and they'll decide whether they want it or not. But Clay Johnson, who was roommates with President Bush at Yale, he was head of the personnel office. And Jody Arrington, the congressman from Lubbock now, he was his deputy. And if you wanted to get appointed to something, you had to go interview them. And so Sergio, he's going to he'll be like I was when the guy on aisle 2 told me I was doing a good job. And when I got to aisle 15, he wanted to know if if he could use me as a reference getting a job. Got to be friends pretty fast. Another one that'll be controversial is Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah.
in HHS, Health and Human Services. He's claimed, I've heard him since then, that he's going to try to help people live better lives and not have as many health problems.
He's all about make America healthy again.
Yeah, make America healthy again. And those are the ones that that'll be looked at in the Senate. They'll grab on anything, and if there's something that someone's done that will make Trump look bad, they'll go all over it. They might say to so and so, well, we didn't really want to ruin your life, but it gave us a chance to give Trump a bad day. I mean, it's tough. It's vicious.
I have a couple questions for you. One of the names that you didn't talk about because she hasn't been appointed to anything, Nikki Haley. Does that surprise you?
Well, no, not really. Trump, above all, he wants loyalty, and DeSantis and Nikki Haley weren't going to. I think Governor Abbott could have, but Governor Abbott didn't want. He thinks that'd be a demotion to be a cabinet member compared to being governor of Texas, and he didn't want to do that. We talked about Abbott and his play on the national stage, and the thing Abbott did, he made immigration the big issue across the country when he started shipping people. The Fox News would report what was going on, but with illegal aliens, but the networks and the newspapers, they just ignored it like it wasn't happening. Once they started dumping those people, the illegal aliens were in New York or Boston or Detroit, Chicago, Denver. People were going, whoa. Well, y'all are a sanctuary city. Yeah, but we didn't mean it that way. You bring some, but don't bring all these people. And they were unloading, a couple of hundred a day. And you got to feed them. You got to do something. And so they were finding out how difficult it was and made it a national issue. And Abbott's to be congratulated on that because he made it a big issue in the presidential campaign. Didn't matter what Trump said, it wasn't an issue until they got into those other cities, and then it was. And so Trump would be on TV, he'd have his statement, and they'd have to see what the other side said, and it became a big deal.
Of the names that you've listed, which one do you think will face the most opposition to get confirmed? Matt Gaetz. Yeah. Some say he's not trustworthy.
Well, that's what the Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, ask
Kevin McCarthy would say that they just hated each other, and they had to watch him on the floor, try to make sure they didn't get in a fist fight or something. It was very, a controversial time in the House, in removing a speaker, and it'll just be a lot of publicity. And Robert Kennedy, they'll go after him because they don't like him. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to be a nice Kennedy and say good thing about Democrats and not express any opinions of his own. And he wasn't of that mindset. So we're going to try to get him on the show sometime. I want to interview him, ask him a lot of questions.
That'd be great.
I think it was, so we'll try to get him sometime.
You want to remind everybody what the saying of the day is?
Saying of the day, it's better to be alone than with bad company. Mothers, if you're listening, or you want to tell your kids that one, that's important.